Hello and welcome. Let's see if I can get a little more light on here. This is going to be the start to a series that, well, I was trying to figure out how to put it in a more linear order, sort of like the Path of the Empress and Path of the Emperor. Though I think I'm realizing that because it's not really a linear topic, it's better to just talk about it in the ways that I feel inspired to talk about it in the moment, and then you can figure out what order or non order works best for you. So I think I'm going to call this series the Twin Flame Timeline Talks. And I think I've said in other videos that I know that many people, especially twin flames who've been on the journey for a while, have recognized something called time. Well, I call it timeline walking. Others call it timeline jumping. Others call it timeline shifting. I've heard it called phase shifting. There's it's interesting trying to get a proper word for it because it really doesn't quite have a proper word. I actually first learned about it, I want to say, give or take 10 years ago, called quantum jumping or quantum leaping. And that started getting me into quantum physics and quantum mechanics, and it's a very fascinating topic. And so I kind of laughed when I first started noticing it in my own journey and then started noticing other people talking about it. I was like, well, that's kind of cool. Because it was definitely, I want to say, one of the grander absurdities that I thought, I'm just going to embrace this and see what happens. And it was actually, it's funny because the first night that it came into my mind, I was walking. And when I was walking, there's near my house is a church parking lot. And there were these parking spaces. And I kind of just had this strange vision about, well, so like Abraham Hicks talks about, to a degree, talks about timelines. I need to look and see if they've talked about it more deeply, but they mentioned it in an interesting way, and it brought into my mind, like, I mean, according to more of the esoteric sciences and to many shamanic paths, actually, there there are infinite timelines, there are infinite dimensions, there are infinite realities and realms. And what I got to thinking about was, well, I mean, if I embrace that absurdity and I assume that there is truth in that, then there should be an ability to shift or walk from one timeline into another. And then I had the then I it like clicked. I was thinking about manifestation and like how Abraham talks about how you can, like, once you fully believe with all of your being and all of your mind and all of your heart that what you want is already in existence, that you already have it. There's a trick in it. You have to feel like you already have what in the 3D it looks like you do not have. Because the universe gives you more of what you already feel like. So if you feel like you are missing something, then the universe gives you more of that. It gives you evidence to show that you are missing it. So then, in theory, if you feel like you have something that for all intents and purposes you do not, but you feel completely like you have it, you believe completely that you have it, that the universe will then bring you evidence that you have it. And what got me was that I was trying to figure out how can one possibly do that without, like, because I'm also a pagan practitioner, I'm a witch, and I I believe in, well, one, in the threefold law, that which you put out comes back to you, and two, in the as ye narn so long as you don't harm anyone, do what you want, which includes do not affect anyone else's free will. And I did not want to affect my DM's free will. So I didn't want to then feel like if I was believing in our union so much that I was then like controlling him and like going against free will that he might have. Now, part of that was a self worth thing. I had to recognize that, one, we always reflect each other. So me wanting him suggests that he wants me, and I saw a lot of evidence of other things reflecting that when I was going through something, he was going through something very similar. You know, when I got if I got sick, he got sick. If I got hurt, he got hurt, and we weren't anywhere around each other, but something similar happened in each way. We each saw similar synchronicities, things like that. Like I could send him a picture of a synchronicity that I saw, and he would send me one that either he just saw right before I sent it to him or that he saw just after I sent it to him. And I realized, okay, there's truth to that. We really do reflect each other. And then it's funny, it's 2:21 on the clock, which is 5, the Hierophant. And it's also the High Priestess and the World card, which is kind of cool. So then I was thinking about it, like there has to be a way that I can believe, so I can believe completely in what it is that I know is true without affecting my DM's free will. And I was thinking about the manifesting thing, and I was walking across these empty parking spaces, and I realized, oh, this is why Spirit has been telling me to be open to any outcome whatsoever, and to also, paradoxically, hold within my heart and my mind and my soul a complete belief in our union without holding a specific look of what it could look like or how it might happen, or like having some vision of it that's like a fantasy or fairy tale, and yet also believing completely in my DM's ability to self-heal and things like that. Is that, oh, there are infinite timelines. So just as I can walk from one parking space into another parking space, I can walk through timelines. Now, I don't know. And well, at the time, I know a little more now. At the time, I didn't have any idea how that might work or why that might work. Though I recalled a lot of talks about Abraham Hicks talking about following divine inspiration and things like blue glass and butterflies and things like that. And what I realized that they were trying to explain is that when you're open to divine inspiration, that opens you up to divine timing. So when you're truly open, you may be, say, sitting at your desk and doing some journaling. And we all get these moments where we're like, I want to go to the store. And you don't really have anything you want to buy. You don't really need anything. And most of us go, nah, I don't need anything. I don't go. Those are the moments you should go. And every time that I've listened to something like that, something significant has shifted. And it took me a minute to realize exactly what was going on. But when I started listening to that, like, oh, I'm feeling like going to the backyard. I may have been in the middle of writing something that I felt was important, but I'm feeling like going to the backyard right now. And as I went to the backyard, I thought, I'm going to walk over by the bird feeders. And then I would find like a woodpecker feather, which are really cool and very significant, spiritually significant for me. Okay, there we go. I followed divine inspiration. I got that. I sat and I meditated with it. I might get a vision. I might not. It might be something that comes later. Or I found somebody that was really looking for a woodpecker feather. Or later I decided that I would give it to somebody just following the same divine inspiration, and they would tell me a story about a time that they had found a woodpecker feather and that it was really, and then I do a video about the meaning of woodpecker feathers, which was one of my first videos on this channel. And then I got other people who told me about times that they'd found woodpecker feathers just like the one I'd had and wondered what it meant, and seeing my video really helped them with something, and they'd explain the story, and then I would get a little bit of like a nudge that this was going to somehow be relevant to my and my DM's union. And then a day later he sent me a picture of a woodpecker feather of the same kind in a different city from where we are. So they're around, but the place that he's in versus the more rural place that I'm in does not typically have those type of woodpeckers, and those feathers are not commonly seen there. So, they started to go, and I started to realize, oh, so when you are open to divine inspiration and you don't get locked into how it works or why it works, which is something that a fellow divine feminine and I, who've become very much soul sisters, have realized is the thing that most of us have difficulty with is before we do something, we often require to know how it works or why we should do it. And you got to stop doing that. You don't need to know how it works or why it works. Sometimes you're going to get the inspiration to do something that's really, really absurd, or it feels really scary, or it feels like, counterintuitive to what you should do, they'll just do it and see what happens. I mean, and a lot of that also brings about shadow work to do with fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, things like that. And as you get better and better at that, you actually see that you have very little to fear with fear of abandonment, especially when you're listening to spirit and divine inspiration. So, as I was walking through the parking lot and thinking about the stuff that Abraham teaches, and I was realizing, like, they talk a lot about how the universe brings things to you from the vortex. And what came to my mind is that, yes, that is true. However, what also happens when you are open to divine inspiration is that you, like, when you truly are open, when you do your shadow work, when you raise your vibration and you start to ascend, you become lighter. You become able to move through different energies. You don't get held back by triggers so much. And this is what a lot of what I talk about in, like, the Paths of the Empress and Emperor series. It helps lighten you. It helps remove a lot of the barriers in your mind about, I must be treated this way or that way, or I must see this in the 3D or that, or I must be able to confirm what spirit is telling me so that I know I'm not crazy, or, all these different obstacles, these resistances that we put in our way. And the less resistant we become to things, the less those things persist, because that which we resist persists. And I was thinking about that, going, you know what, why not go with this idea, right? So I started imagining that every time I walked into a new parking space, I was walking into a completely different timeline. It would be the same day and the same time of a day and the same like geographic space, but it was a different timeline. And as I went through each one, I was playing with the idea of, okay, so let's say I'm in parking space 1, and it's what I feel like has been the 3D confirmation. I am in separation. My DM isn't saying that he doesn't want to be with me or isn't coming back to me, but he's very, very stuck and he doesn't seem very awake. And I don't know how long things are going to go on like this. And then I said, okay, so that doesn't feel good to think about anyway. So I'm going to walk into the next one. Now, maybe in this next timeline, my DM is already free. He's already single, and he's still kind of tied up a little bit with karmic entanglement, but he's on his way. And let's say in this timeline, he's going to be here in a month. And then I'd walk into the next one and say, okay, just to go another way, let's say that my DM believes that his karmic is actually his twin flame, and maybe in this timeline she is his twin flame, and I'm a soulmate, and like a good soulmate, but we were still interacting on a level of being karmics to each other, with me teaching him about receiving love from others and him teaching me about self-love. Okay, then I go to the next timeline or next parking lot, and maybe in that one we don't get back into romantic union, but we have a wonderful friendship, which I want physical connection with my DM, and I so love being romantic with him. But I would not mind being just really, really good friends with him, being BFFs again, because that's similar to where we started, and that's a lot of why our union was really great in the times that it was great, is we were genuinely friends. It wasn't just about sex. It wasn't just about physical connection. It wasn't, it was a friendship, and that's what we both appreciated about it. So I could be happy with that. And it took me a while to get to that space where I was comfortable with that, but that made me lighter already, and it made me less needy, and it stopped doing so much of the runner chaser vibe, because he felt more comfortable around me too, and he could feel that, and I could tell that he was reflecting and also feeling that. Okay, so in this timeline, let's say we're just BFFs, and things are comfortable in that way. Right? And then as I walk into the next timeline space, let's say that in that timeline, he's not really even been in a romantic relationship with the karmic, but has been pretending to be in one because he felt embarrassed about the situation he was in, and he was trying to show off, and he was upset about what he felt was some competition and things like that, and that he still sees himself as in union with me and is just trying to clean up his mess and isn't sure how to do it, though he'll be revealing all truths in like 3 months. And then I started to play with a different bit of the timelines. And I crossed the road and I was in a different set of parking spots. And let's say I'm again let's say I'm in parking spot A. And I was thinking, okay, in this timeline, my DM is going to stay as he has been, going through, let's say, pain cycles and light cycles, and he's always pretty much going to stay as he is, and isn't going to change, and isn't likely to come back because he's been too afraid of love. Now I walk into the next timeline, and in this timeline, he sees that he's been going through that, and he decides that he's going to choose healing for me, right? And then we go into the next timeline, and he sees that he's been going through that, and he decides he's going to choose healing for himself. And I really liked that one. He decides he's going to choose healing for himself rather than for me, which I've regularly told him is how you get to a place of real healing and real happiness, is when you choose it for yourself. Now, I wasn't practicing what I was preaching at the time so much, so I was trying to get there. And that's for another story. Anyways, let's go to the next one. And let's say in the next timeline, this is where I started playing with it a little bit different. Is like in the next timeline, my DM has not really been aware of what genuine love was, and so he wasn't really aware that he was in love with me until he got into the karmic situationship, and then realized the differences between like the toxic limerence that he was in before me and is in now, and that has been helping him learn the difference between genuine love and limerence, and even toxic limerence, and that's actually helping to propel him back to me. And then in the next timeline, he realized it a little beforehand and is scared to come back. And then in the next timeline, he realized it a while ago and isn't scared to come back, though there's some sort of entanglement with karma that he needs to learn. And in the 3D, it's coming out in some sort of like emotional or financial blackmail with the karmic. And so he doesn't want to get me and the kids entangled in it. And then in the next timeline, it's funny, I played with it more and thought, okay, well, twin flames are not twin flames. Let's say I become filthy rich in a positive way, all through donations from people who just enjoy the videos that I do, and I travel around the world with my kids and have a great time, and we learn a lot, and then and my DM learns his lessons here, and I don't worry about what the rest is that happens. And then in another timeline, I faced a fear of mine that which is like that he doesn't see me as equal. He doesn't see me as worthy. He's not really been in love with me, and he doesn't come towards me. And because I won't affect his free will, I don't make him, and so it doesn't happen. And any number of things could be other choices that I make. And then in the next timeline, I envisioned that there were multiple timelines, and that last one was where he was, and that I could shift into another timeline where what he had chosen me, and he just had a lot of self-worth issues and was definitely coming back, and sooner than I expected, and to expect the unexpected. It's funny, it's 2:34 on the clock. And then when I thought that, I actually had to go through a bit of shadow work around am I okay with shifting timelines? Because then it was like, well, wait a minute. If I shift timelines, is this still my DM? Like a lot of readers have talked about, you have to be open to all outcomes because your DM is going to come back to you and seem like almost a completely different person. Not as in different than the person that you love, but different in terms of completely healed. And if you cannot be open to the possibility that despite the damnable things that they have done already, then you cannot be open to a timeline where your DM or DF can come back to you and be healed and to catch up. Another reader talked about in her timeline, what she sees is that a lot of DFs, like they do, it's funny, it seems like they do the slow work, but we actually do it fairly fast. We're just more like the tortoise in the tortoise and hare story. We go slow and steady, whereas the DMs seem to be stuck in their ways up until the DF is actually ready and has not finally released attachment to a destination or an outcome, and realized that the twin flame journey is much more about missions than about the union itself, and has started working on her mission. And then when she's really fulfilled in doing that, then suddenly the DM catches up, much like the hare, and it suddenly is right there just behind you. And let's say you both cross the finish line like that. And I was worried that, like, I don't know, it was weird to say. Like, I'm still trying to remember what I was even worried about, then it seems so absurd. But I was worried that if I walked into another timeline with a DM who has genuinely always loved me, has recognized that it's been genuine love, and has been working on his own shadow work and his own pain cycle, so it's been hard for him to communicate, but he recognized it. And that during separation we were both in shadowy points. However, he definitely chose me, and although he's not been communicating it, partly due to him, partly due to the karmic, and partly due to spirit saying, you two go work things out in your own corners and then it'll bring us back together, that, like, if he was genuinely healed and I had walked from the timeline that I started on with the him that I know onto a new timeline where he was then choosing me and responding in all the ways that I love and appreciate and feel like I really, really want, would it be the same DM? And I know that to a degree feels like an absurd thing, but it's something that came up, and I appreciate it because that was shadow work to do. And it was kind of similar to, like, what if there was an ability, like, let's say I walked into a different timeline and the twin flame energy I'm connected to actually switched to a different DM, and I could have all the things that I wanted and all the things that I cared about and all the energy that I felt with the DM that I have now with someone else. And things could be good with the, let's say the vessel of my DM that's there, and with the kids that we co-parent and things like that. Though I could have all that I wanted in another person, which we commonly